Hello and welcome to Dice and Demons. I'm Emma, and today I want to show you some of the new models from the Cities of Sigmar box set. And the reason for that is that I recently posted a video about how I painted one of the new Freeguild Cavaliers, and I got a bunch of questions from you guys about how big these models actually are and how they stack up both to older and newer models. And so I thought I would just do a quick comparison with some models that you might have in your collection so that you can more easily sort of figure out how big they are compared to other stuff you might have. So here, of course, you see one of these regular Freeguild guys or gals next to an Imperial Guard soldier. And you can see here they're approximately the same height. The Imperial Guard soldier is just crouching slightly, so it's a little bit lower to the ground, but they're almost exactly the same size. And they also both feel like they are quite naturalistic in the way they are proportioned, whereas you can see here it's slightly smaller than the guy here on horseback, than the knight. And I think it makes a little bit of sense, both because of course the knight is wearing armor, which makes him or her look a little bit bigger, but I also do think they are just slightly taller, but nothing that you would ever notice once they're both on the tabletop next to each other. I don't think it's anything that pulls you out of the illusion of the battlefield or anything, but they are slightly smaller, the riders on horseback. Here you can see the Freeguild soldier, person, guy, gal, next to an old barbarian. This is also from Games Workshop, but I can't exactly remember where he's from. But they are also very, very similar in size. I think the angle is slightly off that I'm showing it from, but they are actually quite similar in size. And here you can see it next to one of the old Soros warriors, and they also match really well. And then I have this one. It says GW on the bottom, and it's in my bits box, and I think perhaps it's some sort of old Pistolier or something. I'm not quite sure, but they are actually also match quite well. The Pistolier guy is slightly shorter, but again, he's also crouching just a little bit. So these two would actually not look out of place next to each other. Obviously, the new models are really beautiful sculpts, and they have a lot more details, and the details are sharper and more crisp, but they could definitely be put next to each other and it wouldn't look off at all, because I mean, also of course there are just variations in the human population anyways. There was also quite a few questions about how big this Cavalier was next to one of the old Bretonnian knights, and here you can see them side by side, and it is quite clear just from a glance that the Bretonnian is slightly smaller, well, a little bit more than slightly actually smaller than the new one. It's about half a centimeter, like the size of the horse, if you measure it on the back, and also the size of the rider is approximately, perhaps slightly less than 5 millimeters taller, the new one. So if you put them next to each other, the old Bretonnian knight is going to look like he or she is actually riding like a pony. So it might look a little bit funny, but you could definitely still do it. Here you can see it next to one of the Raptidon units, the new cavalry units for the Seraphon, and they are more or less exactly the same size, which I think is quite cool. They really match. The only thing is that the rider on the horse is still physically bigger than the skink, and I think that is of course quite appropriate, because the skinks are supposed to be, very small and nimble, whereas I guess a knight on horseback is supposed to be a little bit more, big and brawly, and so I think that's quite cool. There was also some people who said they were considering whether or not to give their Sisters of Battle for Warhammer 40,000 a cavalry unit, and so I decided to go with it and see whether or not a Sisters model would actually fit on one of these new horses. So I took a spare Sisters of Battle and I chopped her off at her legs off at the waist, and I used a little bit of milliput to fit her into the saddle of the cavalry horse. And I think, as you can probably tell from the lower part of the leg, she's just a little slight. She's like looking a little bit too slim, with sort of yeah, she's not as robust as the rider that was actually intended to be on top of this horse, and I think you can tell. But I don't think it's like hugely off, and I don't think it's much of an issue. And perhaps some of the other Sisters of Battle models are a little bit more strong and burly, so perhaps they would be a bit better fit. I just only had this model lying around, so I just wanted to try it out. I think if you just give her, you know, a weapon in one hand and a shield in the other hand, I don't think you're going to be noticing it that much. And I also just think it would be really cool to see some Sisters of Battle cavalry units, just because there is so much, you know, medieval Renaissance iconography going on with the Sisters of Battle. So why not give them, you know, some knights on horsebacks, right? That would just be awesome. And lastly, just a couple of photos that might make it a little bit easier for you to tell the exact size of these new models. And on a side note, you'll notice that the place where you are going to be putting the arm on the Freeguild model, that it's entirely flat, the surface is flat, which means that you can pose the arms any which way you want to, which I think is awesome. We have had so many, you know, very nice and dynamic looking models coming out recently, but they're all sort of monopose and easy to build, and that just limits the opportunity you have to make your own choices as to how you want these models to look. And so I think it's really, really nice to see that you actually get to just pose them slightly more the way you want to, even though of course some options are still not open to you. The legs go together one way, but then you can pose the arms. So here you can see the Sisters of Battle cavalry unit thing that I just made next to the old Bretonnian knight, and you'll notice of course that both the new cavalry unit is much bigger, it's simply just taller, but you'll also notice that the proportions are slightly different. So the new horse is has some slightly unrealistic proportions. The legs are very, very long compared to the sort of the mass of the upper body, and also the head is a little bit too small in my opinion, whereas the old Bretonnian horse perhaps looks slightly more realistic in the proportions, but it doesn't look of course quite as dynamic and perhaps quite as cool as the new ones. But that of course that's a matter of personal preference and taste. I probably would have preferred the horse to be just slightly more realistic in the with the proportions, and that has just something to do with the fact that I used to have horses myself, and I was like very much into horseback riding and anatomy and stuff, and so it just looks a little bit weird to me with the new horses, but I do think they look cool, and I have tried telling myself that this is simply a breed of horses that I'm just not familiar with, where these proportions are exactly right. Yeah, I'm trying to tell myself that, and anyways, I do still enjoy these models. I think they're terrific and they're very, very cool and a lot of fun, and I am very happy with the posability of these new models, and that they don't just go together one way, but that you can combine stuff. I think that's a huge plus for this range. Before I end this video, I of course, as always, would like to take the opportunity to thank the wonderful people who support Dice and Demons over on Patreon. So thank you so much to Thomas Madsen, Scott Broadway, Jordan Hollins, Andrea Correa, Anthony Polcastro, Queen's Wolf, JJ Waltz, Gwenna L, Mola Mola, TJ Kubiak, Mando Project, Starcorn85, S. Bear, Echinocacus, Firelord21, and Elliot Philby. If you also want to help support Dice and Demons, you can do so over on Patreon, and I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. Also remember that you can follow me as Dice and Demons over on Instagram and X, formerly known as Twitter, where you can stay up to date on my painting projects. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye!